In the small dusty town of Desert Hollow, there lived a cowboy named Jed Lawson. His life was simple yet lonely. He spent most of his days riding across the wide, empty plains, tending to cattle and doing odd jobs for the townsfolk. His heart was as empty as the vast desert surrounding him, and the years of solitude had begun to take their toll. He longed for something different, something to fill the aching emptiness inside him. One evening, as Jed sat by the fire at his small cabin, he idly flipped through the local paper. His rough hands traced over the worn pages, not really looking for anything in particular, just filling the silence. Then something caught his eye. The ad was small and simple, hidden in the corner of the page. It read, "For $150, buy a Smile Rancher. A sure way to find joy in the Wild West." Jed squinted at the words. A Smile Rancher? What in the world was that? He had never heard of such a thing before. The thought of joy seemed foreign to him. For years his life had been filled with hard work, long days and nights spent alone. The idea of finding joy, especially in the harsh wilderness of the West, seemed almost too good to be true. He scratched his head thinking about it. He had nothing to lose. $150 wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to give something new a try. Maybe this Smile Rancher was just the thing to lift his spirits. He didn't even know what it was, but the thought of finding happiness was enough to push him to act. The next morning, Jed saddled up his horse, Dusty, and rode into town. The sun was already high in the sky and the air was dry and warm. The streets of Desert Hollow were quiet, with only a few people going about their daily routines. The trading post where the ad had pointed him to sat at the edge of town. It was a small wooden building, its sign swaying gently in the breeze, creaking with each gust of wind. As Jed entered the trading post, the old man behind the counter looked up from a book he was reading. His eyes were sharp despite his age, and his face was lined with deep wrinkles. He wore a wide grin, though it wasn't one of happiness, it was more of a knowing smile, as though he understood things others didn't. "You here for the Smile Rancher?" the old man asked without a hint of surprise. Jed nodded, taking a step forward. "I saw the ad in the paper. It says I can buy a Smile Rancher for $150. The old man chuckled, the sound raspy like gravel scraping against stone. "Yep, that's right. $150 and you'll own the land. But it ain't just any land. This place is special." Jed raised an eyebrow. "Special? How so?" The old man leaned in closer, lowering his voice as if he were sharing a great secret. "Well, the Smile Rancher ain't just a ranch. It's a place where happiness grows. People who've been lonely, who've been lost, they find what they need there. It's more than just land and animals. It's a kind of magic." Jed couldn't help but laugh a little. Magic in the Wild West? It sounded silly, but something about the old man's eyes made him stop laughing. There was a seriousness to him, as if he believed every word he was saying. $150, the old man repeated, "and it's yours. But remember this, if you want the happiness it offers, you've got to give something in return. It ain't just a piece of land. It's a life-changing experience. You ready for that?" Jed hesitated. Life-changing? He wasn't sure what to think. He had never been one to believe in magic or anything like that. But a part of him was tired of his lonely life, of the endless days riding alone across the empty desert. Maybe this Smile Rancher was the change he needed. With a sigh, Jed reached into his pocket and pulled out the $150. The old man smiled wider, as though he had known Jed would make the choice all along. "Pleasure doing business with you," the old man said, taking the money. He handed Jed a small weathered ledger and a key. "This will guide you to the place. You'll find it about a day's ride out from here. Good luck, cowboy. You'll need it." Jed took the ledger and key, still unsure of what exactly he had just gotten himself into. But there was something about the excitement in his chest that told him this might be the adventure he had been searching for. Maybe, just maybe, it was the answer to his loneliness. As Jed left the trading post, the sun beat down upon him and he mounted his horse. He followed the directions in the ledger, which led him south, through the dry plains and into the foothills of the distant mountains. It was a long ride, and by evening the sun had begun to set, casting a warm orange glow over the landscape. The sky was quiet as Jed rode on, with only the sound of Dusty's hooves echoing through the stillness. The further he rode, the more he felt an odd sense of anticipation. Something about the journey felt important, though he couldn't quite explain why. It was as if the land itself were pulling him forward. By nightfall, Jed set up camp near a small creek where he cooked some beans over a fire. As he ate, his mind wandered. What was a Smile Rancher? What had he really bought? He could only guess, but the possibility of something new, something hopeful, kept him going. The next morning, he continued his ride. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Jed began to feel something strange, an energy in the air. The land around him seemed to hum with life. It wasn't just the animals or the trees. There was something else, something more. It felt as though the earth itself was alive, guiding him to something greater. Hours passed, and finally, around midday, Jed saw it. The Smile Rancher. It was unlike anything he had expected. In the middle of a wide valley, nestled between two hills, stood a sprawling ranch. The fields were lush with green grass, something rare in this dry land. Flowers bloomed in vibrant colors, and the air smelled sweet with sage and wild herbs. There was a quiet stillness here. Unlike the harsh winds and dust storms that were common in the desert, the land felt peaceful, almost magical, as if it had been waiting for him. Jed dismounted, his heart racing. This was it. This was the Smile Rancher. As he stood there, taking it all in, a feeling of calm washed over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt something other than loneliness. Could this be the change he had been seeking? The answer to that question would come soon enough. The Smile Rancher, with its lush fields and vibrant flowers, looked almost too perfect to be real. Jed stood at the edge of the land, taking it all in. The land stretched out before him like a green carpet, with small animals darting in and out of the grass. The sun was high, casting a warm golden glow over everything, and the air smelled fresh, full of life and promise. Jed had never seen anything like it in all his years in the Wild West. He felt an odd sense of peace settle in his chest as he walked further into the ranch. The land felt alive, almost as if it were welcoming him, but at the same time Jed couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. His boots made soft crunching noises as he walked across the soft earth, but there was no other sound. No birds singing, no wind blowing through the trees, just silence. As he explored, Jed noticed something else odd. There were no signs of any people. No ranch hands or workers, just the land, stretching on as far as the eye could see. He made his way to a small wooden cabin that stood near the center of the ranch. It was simple yet sturdy, with a small porch that had a few old rocking chairs. The windows were clean, but there was no sign of life inside. The door creaked open when Jed pushed it, and he stepped inside. The cabin was empty except for a few basic pieces of furniture. Nothing too fancy, just the essentials. A bed, a wooden table, a few chairs, and a stove. But what caught Jed's attention was a small wooden box sitting on the table. It was simple, unmarked, and looked old. Curiosity piqued, he opened the box. Inside, he found a strange piece of cloth, a bright red scarf, along with a note that read, "To the one who seeks happiness, beware. The path you are on will change you forever. You must decide what is more important to you, finding joy or holding on to your past." Jed frowned. The note made little sense to him. What did it mean? Was it some kind of warning, or was it part of the strange magic the old man had mentioned? He didn't know, but he folded the note and put it in his pocket. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but something inside him told him that this was only the beginning. As Jed stepped back outside, he noticed a figure in the distance. At first he thought it was a mirage, the heat of the desert playing tricks on his eyes. But as he looked closer, he saw 7 girls walking toward him, moving gracefully through the tall grass. They were dressed in colorful clothing, and their dark hair swayed in the breeze. Each girl had a peaceful smile on her face, but their eyes held an air of mystery, as if they knew things that Jed couldn't understand. Jed stopped in his tracks, unsure of what to do. The girls were close now, and as they surrounded him, he felt a strange sensation, like being both calm and nervous at the same time. They didn't speak, but their presence was overwhelming, filling the air with a quiet energy that he couldn't explain. The tallest of the girls, who looked to be the eldest, stepped forward. She had dark eyes that seemed to look right through Jed, as if she could see into his soul. She smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that made him feel at ease. It was more knowing, as if she understood something about him that he didn't even know about himself. "You are here," she said, her voice soft and melodic, but with a quiet power behind it. "You have come to the Smile Rancher, but you don't yet know what you have found." Jed felt a chill run down his spine. "I don't understand." he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought this was just a piece of land. A place where I could be alone. The girl's smile deepened and she shook her head slowly. The Smile Rancher is not just land. It is a place where the heart can heal, where the soul can find peace. But that peace comes at a price. Jed swallowed hard. What did she mean by that? He didn't want to pay a price, he just wanted to find some joy, some purpose in his life. After all, that was the reason he had come all this way. The girl took a step closer. You must learn to open your heart, she said, her voice almost a whisper now. If you truly want to understand the magic here, you must be willing to change. To let go of the loneliness, the pain, the past. Only then can you find what you seek. Jed didn't know what to say. The words felt heavy in the air, like they carried a weight he wasn't ready to bear. He had spent so many years guarding his heart, building walls around it to protect himself from the hurt and loss he had experienced in his life. Could he really open himself up? Could he let go of everything that had held him back for so long? Before Jed could respond, the girls began to move away. They didn't walk like ordinary people. There was something almost ethereal about their movements, as if they glided rather than walked. Each girl seemed to melt into the landscape, disappearing one by one into the fields. The eldest girl was the last to leave. She turned to face Jed once more, her gaze steady. You will find the truth here, she said, her voice like a whisper on the wind. But only if you are willing to look within yourself. The Smile Rancher will show you what you need to see, and with that she was gone. Jed stood there alone once more, the silence pressing in around him. The ranch was still, but his mind was racing. What had just happened? Who were those girls, and what had they meant by the truth? He walked back to the cabin, his steps slow and thoughtful. The note in his pocket felt heavier now, like a reminder that there was something more to this place than he could understand. It was as if the land itself was calling him to something greater, something that would change him forever. Jed sat down on the porch of the cabin, the sun beginning to set in the distance. The sky was a brilliant mix of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the fields. He looked around at the ranch, taking in the beauty of the land. For the first time in years, he didn't feel quite so alone, but the question still lingered in his mind. What was this place? What was the magic behind the Smile Rancher? And most importantly, was he ready to face whatever lay ahead? As the night fell, Jed knew one thing for certain. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Jed woke up the next morning feeling different. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light across the fields. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, and looked out the window at the Smile Rancher. The land seemed even more alive than before, the colors of the flowers brighter, the grass greener, and the air fresher. But this time, something else caught his attention. A feeling deep inside him, a sense that the ranch was no longer just a place of peace. It was something more. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of what had happened the night before. The Apache girls, their words, and the strange ceremony, they all seemed to be a part of something bigger, something Jed couldn't quite grasp. The peace the ranch brought him wasn't just about the land or the crops that grew so easily. It was about something deeper, something hidden in the land itself. The ranch wasn't just offering him a place to heal, it was asking him to change. Jed walked outside, his boots crunching softly on the dirt as he made his way toward the creek. The water sparkled in the morning light, flowing gently over the rocks as if it had been waiting for him to come closer. The sound of the water was soothing, but his mind was far from calm. He was thinking about the girls, about their message. They had told him that the Smile Rancher was a place for healing, but it came at a price. What was that price? And was he ready to pay it? The land had already started to work its magic on him. He could feel it in the way his heart felt lighter, the way his hands moved with a calm that had been missing for so long. But the girls had warned him. The ranch could heal him, but only if he was willing to face his own heart, his own pain. Jed sat down by the creek, his legs crossed under him. He stared at the water, watching the ripples spread out across the surface. The day before, he had felt the weight of his grief lifting just a little. It had been painful, but it had also been freeing. Now he had to ask himself, could he continue to let go? Could he allow the ranch to help him heal completely? The silence around him was comforting, but it also made the questions in his mind louder. He had spent years running from his pain, from the loss of his family. After the accident that had taken them from him, he had thrown himself into work. He had traveled, fought in skirmishes and spent countless hours alone trying to outrun the memories. But now in this strange place he couldn't avoid them anymore. The ranch had shown him that there was no escaping the past, not if he wanted to move forward. Jed closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He had been carrying the weight of his grief for so long that it had become a part of him, a part he didn't know how to let go of. Could he forgive himself? Could he forgive life for taking his family away from him? And more than that, could he allow himself to feel happiness again? As he sat by the creek, he remembered the words of the eldest girl. You must decide what is more important to you, finding joy or holding on to your past. He realized that this was the challenge the ranch had set before him. He couldn't have both. If he wanted peace, he would have to let go of the pain. He stood up, feeling the weight of the decision before him. He didn't know if he was ready, but he knew he had to try. Slowly, he made his way back to the cabin, his heart heavy with the understanding that change wasn't going to be easy. It would take time, effort, and courage. But if he wanted to find the joy he had been searching for, he would have to face the truth of his own heart. That afternoon, as Jed worked the fields, his mind kept drifting back to the ranch's magic, to the girls and to the words they had spoken. The ranch was a place of healing, but it also tested those who came to it. The magic was real, but it wasn't something that could be taken lightly. Jed could feel it in every step he took and every plant he tended to. The land seemed to respond to his emotions. When he was calm and open, the crops grew stronger. When he was weighed down by doubt, they seemed to slow. It was as if the land itself was watching him, waiting for him to make a choice. As the days passed, Jed began to notice changes, not just in the land but in himself. The memories that had once haunted him began to lose some of their power. He still thought of his family, of the life they had shared, but the sharp pain of loss didn't grip him as tightly as it once had. It was as though the ranch was helping him soften the edges of his grief, allowing him to hold on to the good memories without the unbearable sadness that had once accompanied them. One evening, as Jed sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun set behind the hills, the eldest Apache girl appeared once again. She stood in the distance, her silhouette framed by the orange light of the setting sun. She walked toward him, her steps quiet but purposeful. You have made progress, she said softly, her voice carrying a calm authority. The land has worked its magic, but you must continue to walk the path. Jed nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I'm trying, he said, his voice rough, but I don't know if I'm ready. I've spent so long avoiding my pain. It's hard to let go. The girl smiled gently, a smile that seemed to understand more than words could express. Healing is not a straight path, she said. It is a journey, one that takes time. But you have made the first step, and that is enough for now. Jed felt a sense of relief, though it was bittersweet. He knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone. The ranch, the land, and the girls, they were all helping him in ways he hadn't understood before. You will face challenges, the girl continued. But remember, the land will always be here and it will guide you. Trust it and trust yourself. With those final words, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Jed watched her go, his heart filled with a quiet sense of peace. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew that there were still many challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face them. As the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, Jed stood up from the porch and walked into the cabin. He had made a choice to let go of the past and embrace the possibility of healing. It wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to try. The Smile Rancher had offered him a chance at something he had long forgotten: hope. And he wasn't going to waste it. The days at Smile Rancher seemed to blend together for Jed. Each morning he woke up to the sound of birds singing in the trees and the soft rustle of the wind through the grass. The ranch had become his home in ways he never thought possible. The crops were thriving, the animals were healthy, and the land seemed to hum with life. But more importantly, Jed was beginning to feel at peace. The grief that had once filled his heart was no longer as heavy. He still missed his family, the love he had lost, but the sadness no longer controlled him. Each day he allowed himself to feel a little more, to embrace the joy that the ranch offered. He no longer ran from the memories of his past, but instead allowed them to exist alongside the present, like pieces of a life well lived. Jed had found healing, but he knew he couldn't do it alone forever. The ranch had shown him the way, but now he understood that true healing came from sharing the peace he had found. The land had given him so much, now it was time to give back. One morning, as Jed walked along the edge of the ranch, he saw the familiar figures of the 7 Apache girls in the distance. They were gathered by the creek, their faces serene as though they had been waiting for him. The eldest girl turned and met his gaze, her smile warm and knowing. "You have done well, Cowboy," she said, her voice like the soft rustling of leaves. "You have opened your heart and allowed the ranch to heal you." Jed nodded, feeling a sense of pride mixed with humility. "I've learned a lot," he said. "The ranch, it's not just a place. It's more than that. It's about learning to live again, to love again." The girl's smile deepened and she stepped forward. "You are ready," she said. "The ranch has healed you, but now you must take what you have learned and share it with others." The true magic of Smile Rancher is in the connection it fosters. It is not just for one soul. It is meant to be shared. Jed felt a wave of understanding wash over him. The ranch wasn't just a place to escape from the world. It was a place to bring people together, to heal the wounds of many, not just his own. The smile on his face grew wider as he realized that this was the next step in his journey. He couldn't keep the peace he had found to himself. It was time to open the doors of the ranch to others. "You are right," Jed said, his voice steady. "I can't keep this to myself. There's enough here to help more than just me. I need to invite others to come to see what the ranch has to offer." The girl nodded, a look of approval in her eyes. "You have learned well, Cowboy. The land will guide you. Trust it, and it will show you the way." Over the next few days, Jed began making plans. He went into the nearby town of Desert Hollow, where he had once lived a solitary life, and spoke to the people there. He told them about the Smile Rancher, about the peace it had brought him, and how it might help others who were struggling. Some were skeptical at first, thinking it was just another one of those wild ideas that came from the stranger in the desert. But there were others who were curious, who felt a spark of hope at Jed's words. Slowly, the word spread. One by one, people came to the ranch. Some came with heavy hearts, others with broken spirits. Some came simply because they heard about a peaceful place where they could find rest. Jed watched as people arrived, some with uncertainty, others with hope. He greeted them with a warm smile and led them across the fields to the cabin, just as the Apache girls had once led him. The land was quiet, but it was alive with a welcoming energy. The ranch seemed to embrace each person who walked through its gates, offering peace, a sense of belonging, and the chance to heal. As the weeks passed, the ranch began to transform. It wasn't just the land that had changed, it was the people. The townsfolk who came to the ranch began to smile more, to laugh, to talk about their pasts and their pain in ways they had never been able to before. There was something about the ranch that helped them open up, to release the burdens they had carried for so long. Jed worked with them, helping them tend to the crops, care for the animals, and find comfort in the simple, peaceful life the ranch offered. And each day as the sun set behind the hills, he could see the change in their faces. The peace he had found had begun to spread, and it was more than he had ever hoped for. One evening, as Jed sat by the creek, watching the water flow gently over the rocks, the eldest Apache girl appeared again. She walked toward him, her presence as calm and serene as ever. "You have done what you needed to do," she said, her voice soft but filled with power. "The Smile Rancher is no longer just your home, it is a place for many. You have shared its magic, and now it will continue to heal, to grow." Jed smiled, a sense of fulfillment in his heart. "I never imagined this would happen. I came here looking for peace, and now I found a way to share it." The girl nodded, her smile warm. "That is the true magic of the Smile Rancher. It heals not just one, but many. You have learned to trust the land, and in turn it has trusted you." Jed stood up and looked out over the land, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The ranch had given him more than he had ever expected. It had healed his heart, opened his eyes, and shown him the power of sharing joy. He had learned that true happiness wasn't about keeping things to yourself. It was about sharing with others, offering what you had to help them heal as well. "Thank you," Jed said, his voice filled with sincerity, "for everything. I'll never forget what this place has done for me." The girl nodded once more, her eyes gleaming with a quiet understanding. "The ranch will always be here for you, Cowboy. And now it will be here for others as well. Your journey has just begun." As the girl disappeared into the trees, Jed stood there for a moment longer, the wind blowing gently through the grass. He looked at the ranch, the land that had healed him and smiled. He had found the peace he had been searching for, and now he had found something even more important, a purpose. The Smile Rancher was no longer just a place, it was a home for all those who needed it. And Jed Lawson, the once lonely cowboy, had become the heart of it all. The days that followed Jed's strange encounter with the 7 Apache girls were filled with a quiet, yet growing sense of wonder. Every morning as the sun rose over the hills, Jed walked the land, feeling the soft earth beneath his boots. He had begun to notice something unusual. The land itself seemed to change before his eyes. What had once been just a ranch with some grass and flowers now felt alive, almost as if it had its own pulse. The ranch had become a place where everything seemed to grow effortlessly. The crops in the fields sprouted faster than he had ever seen. Corn, wheat, and beans were already thriving in rows, their bright green leaves reaching toward the sun. The small stream that ran through the ranch sparkled in the sunlight, and the animals that wandered through the fields were healthier than any Jed had ever seen. Jed spent hours tending to the ranch, working with the animals and the crops. At first it felt like any other day on a farm, but there was a difference. Everything seemed to flourish with so little effort. The land almost seemed to want to help him, as if it was responding to his presence. Despite the beauty around him, Jed couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this ranch, something hidden just beneath the surface. He thought back to the words of the eldest Apache girl. The Smile Rancher is not just land. It is a place where the heart can heal, where the soul can find peace. But that peace comes at a price. What price? What did she mean by that? Jed couldn't figure it out. He had come here seeking peace, a way to fill the emptiness in his heart, but was there something more he needed to do? Something he was missing? The nights were quiet, and each evening as the sun set and painted the sky with hues of pink and gold, Jed would sit on the porch of the cabin. It was on one such evening, as the shadows grew long and the air began to cool, that he heard a soft sound, a gentle rustling, like the wind moving through the trees. Jed stood up slowly, listening. The wind was still and there was no breeze to speak of, but the sound was coming from somewhere nearby. He walked toward the source of the sound, following a narrow path through the tall grass that led him to the edge of the ranch. There, by the creek, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. The 7 Apache girls were standing in a circle, their arms raised toward the sky, their faces peaceful but serious. They were silent, as if in some sort of trance. Their eyes were closed, and Jed felt an overwhelming sense of curiosity wash over him. He wanted to call out to them, to ask them what they were doing, but something told him to remain silent. The scene before him felt sacred, like a ritual or ceremony. He stepped closer, careful not to disturb them. As he moved forward, one of the girls opened her eyes. She looked at him, and for the first time, Jed saw something different in her gaze, something warm, almost like a quiet invitation. "You have come far," she said softly, her voice like the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. "You have worked with the land, but now you must understand its true power." Jed didn't know what to say. He had so many questions, but he felt as if he were standing on the edge of something important, something that he was only beginning to understand. The eldest girl, the one who had spoken to him before, stepped forward. Her face was calm, but there was a deep wisdom in her eyes, as if she had seen the world in ways Jed couldn't yet comprehend. "Listen, cowboy," she said in her soft voice. "The Smile Rancher is more than just a place. It is a spirit, a force of nature. It exists to heal the hearts of those who come here, but it also tests them. It tests their hearts, their willingness to change, to face the truths they have hidden from themselves." Jed swallowed hard. He had been running from the pain of his past for years, ever since he had lost his family in a tragic accident. He had buried his grief deep inside, never allowing himself to truly mourn. He had kept moving, always keeping busy, always avoiding the emptiness that gnawed at him. Now, standing in the presence of these girls, he realized that the ranch had somehow found him. It had drawn him in, knowing that he needed to face his past, to heal in ways he hadn't even known he needed. "The Smile Rancher is a gift," the eldest girl continued, "but it also asks for something in return. You must give up your pain, your fear, your anger. Only then will you find the happiness you seek." Jed felt a knot tighten in his chest. Was he ready to let go of everything he had held on to for so long? Could he truly forgive himself for the mistakes he had made? for the loss he had never allowed himself to fully feel. "The land will guide you," the girl said, almost as if reading his thoughts. "But it is your heart that must decide whether it will heal. You cannot stay here forever, cowboy. The ranch will only offer peace to those who are willing to face the truth, to let go of the past." As she spoke, Jed felt something strange happen. The air around him seemed to shimmer, and he suddenly felt overwhelmed with emotion. Memories flooded his mind. Memories of his family, of the love he had once known, of the joy he had lost when tragedy struck. For a moment, it felt as though the land itself was speaking to him, telling him that it was time to let go. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't try to hide them. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the grief he had buried so deep inside. It was a raw, aching feeling, but it was also strangely freeing. The burden he had carried for so long seemed to lighten, just a little. The girls watched him silently, their faces filled with understanding. They didn't speak, but their presence was enough. They had come to guide him, to show him the way. Finally, the eldest girl spoke again. "You have begun the journey, cowboy. Now it is up to you to continue. The Smile Rancher will show you the way, but you must choose to walk it." Jed nodded, his heart still heavy but somehow lighter than it had been before. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time he felt a sense of hope. The girls slowly began to walk away, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Jed stood there for a long time watching them go, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't sure what he had just experienced, but he knew one thing for certain. His life was about to change forever.